Oh, thank you very much, Captain Foster.
Aye, aye.
And thank you to the chair for convening what, as usual, is a very timely and I'm sure will be a very informative hearing. We're here in the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and I think it's a very timely discussion to have to think about the application of science to fighting the spread of COVID and to reflect on the lessons that we've learned over the past couple of years, because as the chair said, this is not something that's over and done with. It's something that we're going to be dealing with for many years. And it also is something that we have to learn from, because we would hope this would be the last pandemic the world experiences, but history shows that it's probably not going to be. And we certainly would be doing society a disservice if we did not apply the lessons that we've learned here. So I'll tell you a couple of things that I'm looking forward to talking about in this hearing. First of all, I think that we need to be more holistic about considering what our goals are when we institute public health measures in response to a pandemic, because it seems pretty clear, looking at what has happened with COVID, that focusing on merely containment is probably not the right thing to do. Containment proved to be impossible with many of the variants of COVID. The countries that were the most draconian in trying to contain rather than trying to manage the spread of the virus are some of the ones that did the worst in terms of healthcare outcomes. So I look forward to having that discussion. And I also think it's time that we acknowledge the fact that when we are contemplating what to do to mitigate the spread, that we contemplate all of the societal costs that are borne, not just the health costs. And that's something that we kind of learned to our misfortune through the recent pandemic, is that we've got a lot of societal costs that public health officials were not considering when they made some of these decisions. For example, things like learning loss in children. For example, things like behavioral health issues, things like substance abuse issues that occur when people are not allowed to socialize with each other. And certainly the economic costs that are imposed on society by actions like lockdowns. Not to say that any of those are more important than stopping the spread of a variant, but we would be foolish not to consider the fact that the actions that we take as a government do have societal consequences. And I think that we've determined kind of through this process that making these decisions is more complex, that we have to kind of weigh all of these different factors. And although it is difficult to balance something like an economic cost against lives lost, we have to somehow parse that metric. And to something that the chairman just mentioned, communication, I think, is something that we've learned is much more important than we ever thought it was. The words that we use when we communicate with the public about the science of an epidemic are critically important. And the fact that we need to maintain the public's trust. In many cases, I think that we had a kind of a scientific arrogance in our communication with our public over the last couple of years, and that's something that we need to avoid in the future, because only through being transparent and honest with the public can we get them to trust us when we tell them that a certain action is the best thing for society. We certainly can't hide things like uncertainty and tell people that this is the right thing, and then tomorrow tell them that the science has shifted and something else is now the right thing to do. That's going to shatter their trust. We need to be upfront and honest with them when uncertainty exists. And then lastly, and I don't think any of our witnesses today would have the sand to tell us this, but we as public leaders, I think we need to learn by example, and that's something that we've learned to our misfortune over the last couple of years. The words that we use are very important, and the actions that we take are very important. And I think that events in my home state of California and states around the country have proven that when public officials are caught not following their own guidance, that is incredibly destructive to public trust. So that's something I think we need to keep in mind as we not only go through this hearing, but as we contemplate the way to handle epidemics in the future. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to the hearing with you and looking forward to see what our witnesses have to say. I yield back.
Thank you. And if there are